Dr. Ainslie, great to have you with us. I understand your most recent research is actually on the possibility of lifting social restrictions, and you've been doing a lot of work on the social distancing measures that China imposed. There is some good news here, then, in your research about the extent to which you can lift restrictions once you've got some control of the disease. How is it possible to lift restrictions?
So what our report was looking at was the relationship between transmission and economic activity. So what we looked at is how the social distancing measures in China and then the subsequent relaxation of those measures was related to transmission. And what we found is that initially movement and transmission were very closely linked, as you might expect. But then once those stringent social distancing measures were in place, and then the outbreak was contained, and by contained I mean very low numbers of cases, then we saw a decoupling of this relationship between movement. So as movement increased and China restarted their economy, we didn't see an increase in transmission.
So with that, does it look like we could get this under control in the next few weeks in Europe and the following few weeks in the U.S. as well? Well, so Europe and the U.S. are at a different stage in their respective outbreaks to China. China is a couple months ahead of us. However, if we achieve containment in Europe and the U.S., then at that point, it's time to start thinking about potential relaxation. But one important point is that China is not relaxing all their social distancing measures at once. It depends on location, the severity of the outbreak in that location, and they're still having very high levels of surveillance. So it's a very intentional relaxation.
Yes, I was going to ask you for more details then, Kylie, on how exactly you go about relaxing these measures without seeing another uptick in the virus. Is it because you don't really relax them in a very sort of colloquial sense of the word? You don't remove them all at all. You just remove specific limitations in specific places with a lot of data and a lot of surveillance. I mean, how is it possible that you can relax these measures without seeing the outbreak continue to pick up?
Well, you're absolutely correct. In China, they didn't relax all measures at once, and they didn't relax them in all locations at once. So they started with areas where the outbreak wasn't as large. So in places like Beijing, they were able to start to let people go back to work only after a few weeks of a total lockdown. However, in Hubei, where the major outbreak occurred, those measures were in place for almost 2 months. And then once they start lifting them, they started with factories and work, trying to get people back to work so that economic activity could resume. Now, schools are still closed in most places, so children have not gone back to school yet. And they've designated different zones of varying risk, so high, medium, and low, so that more travel is allowed in low-risk areas, less travel is allowed in high-risk areas.